Throughout history, freethinkers have outraged the religious with their wacky ideas about the virtues of free speech, reason, and of course, eating babies. Now, God is dying, and it's time to dispose of his remains. From the pits of hell, Satan sends two puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment with Ali Rizvi and Armin Navabi.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment. My name is Ali Rizvi as always, and I'm here with Armin Navabi as always. Armin, what's up?
Hello.
Armin, yeah, that's it. So we're going to get right into it. Today we have, actually I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. We are joined by Mubin Shaikh, and Mubin Shaikh is, he's a Canadian who famously went undercover with jihadists to foil a Toronto terrorism plot. So he infiltrated the cell and he helped bust a plot wide open. He is a former security intelligence and counterterrorism operative. He's a widely valued expert on radicalization, deradicalization, national security, and counterterrorism. Mubin has advised a number of international organizations, including the United Nations Security Council, the U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs with NATO, the National Counterterrorism Center, and Special Operations Command Central. And he's also an external expert with the Joint Staff SMA for CENTCOM Command Staff. And most recently, he was involved in having conversations with a returned Canadian ISIS fighter named Abu Huzaifa al-Kanadi, and he was counseling him. So we're going to get into, we have just a lot to get to. Mubin, first of all, welcome to the podcast, and we're really honored to have you here.
Aloha snack bar.
Aloha snack bar, yeah. And I was going to say, wassalam. Okay, wa alaikum assalam.
All right.
That's not the
Wait,
same
isn't
thing.
that haram that you said that?
Nothing's
who,
haram.
me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Whether the topic of whether you can give salam to non-Muslims or not.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a thing. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so you have led just an amazing career. You've led a really, really interesting life. I know you started out very young. I think you started getting involved in law enforcement, from what I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you were just 14 or 15, and at some point you went to Pakistan, and you became a fundamentalist after, I think, the meeting with the Taliban. That's what I read. And then you changed your views after 9/11. There was a transformation. So let's just start really briefly with it. How did this all start? Were you born in Canada? Were you born overseas? How did you grow up? And how did?
Yeah. Well, I just I'll keep it brief.
Sorry. How did you get your start? Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I'm born and raised in Toronto, Canada. Indian background. Went to public school by daytime. By evening or in the evening, every day, 2 hours, madrasa, right? Quran school. Boys on one side, girls on the other side, rocking back and forth at wooden benches, reciting the Quran, not understanding a word of what we were saying. You made a mistake, you got slapped, beat, put in stress positions. There was a stark contrast between what I was seeing from the cultural community that I came from and this Western society that I was doing the public school at, where girls and boys mixing, caring, nurturing environment, right? Stark contrast. I get through the grades, get to basically middle school. When I'm moving to high school, I joined the Army Cadets. Okay, so now a number of things happen. I'm now in high school, and there's a peer group that's going to form with the high school. And also, I joined the Army Cadets, which in the U.S. they call it Junior ROTC. Brits have cadets. I think Australians have cadets as well.
And how old were you at this time?
So the cadets. So I was 13, and I did that up to the age of 18, basically. So that's a new peer group and a new value system, I would even say. So the ideas, I would say, of being a militant or militancy, I would say actually more of it came from the Army Cadets than it did from my family, because I should note my grandfather was a police officer in India when the British were there. and he was very like made it a point to be not political in the home. So even me, I never grew up in the home hearing about Kashmir or Pakistan or like that. That never formed any part of my upbringing. It was a very, I would say, because it was still with the Deobandi Tabligis, right? And for those who may not know, this is more your, response to British colonialism, Indian Muslim thinking. The Deobandi school, which of course underpins even the Taliban, and of course all the madrasas that are in Britain, America, Canada. So that's the milieu from which I was emerging.
Right.
Then what happened is at 18, I basically had a house party at my house, my parents' house, while they were gone, traveling. And unbeknownst to me, my father had told his brother to check on the house. So in the middle of the house party, my uncle, who is like the scowling, meanie-faced, bearded thobe, basically burst through the door.
Oh shit, that's a nightmare when you're 18.
I remember, dude. I almost pissed myself, like literally. Like I had to hold my bladder because I was gonna urinate on myself. He came in just freaking out. What is this? Like his words. People they pray Quran here, they pray namaz here, and you bring these suwar ki aulad, right? The people of pigs. You bring them here like such a very, and they're very racist against white people. And so here I am in his, brother's house, right? The nephew has done this. And dude, I mean, there were like joints everywhere and beer caps everywhere and in the eaves trough. It was just a nightmare. And so basically I went into panic mode. I thought to myself, the only way I'm going to fix this and repair this is to quote unquote, get religious. All right. So this is where a lot of Muslim kids do this. They go on this complete 180. And if I like force myself into this box, my life will be okay. So that meant for me going with the Tabligh Jamaat 4 months, 2 months in India, 2 months in Pakistan. This is the summer of 95. And the Tablighis, they do this thing, right? And for those of you may not know, the Tabligh Jamaat is basically, again, Deobandi linked group, very fundamentalist, but to their credit, completely apolitical. Like you are not allowed to talk politics at all whatsoever. So they're able to operate in a lot of areas where people would normally not be able to operate. I remember seeing them with my own eyes in 1998 in Israel or in 2003 in Damascus. They're underground in Damascus. These guys were from Jordan. But anyways, so I went with the Tablighis. And it's basically an immersion program, right? You live in the masjid, you invite people to the mosque, there's a socializing going on, the preaching, and really it's like, you can call it brainwashing or like boot camp or, conditioning or immersion, whatever you want to call it, but it's 4 months, every day, in and out, same routine. And part of that routine involved walking about in the local area that you were basically posted in. So in Pakistan, I was sent to a place called Quetta. Quetta in 1995 was really where, a major Taliban stronghold. It remains, it fell out of their power for a while, but now it's well within their power now.
Yeah. So Quetta is it's in Balochistan, which has a very lively separatist movement.
That's right. Its own separatist movement. That's right. And so actually we went to a place also called Mastung. And Mastung, I remember, is where ISIS had actually set up its shop, right? Like Islamic State in Khorasan province. So it's amazing how a lot of the stuff from back then is kind of reverberating now. So this is 1995. I'm walking in the area. I see guys who I think are other Tablighis, right? Because they dressed exactly the same. So as I came close to them, I realized that these guys were armed, like heavily armed, rocket propelled grenades, machine guns, ammunition belts, all things that I had been familiarized by through the Army cadets, right? So I knew exactly what that was. And for me, this Muslim kid, 18 years old, facing this crisis moment, right? The house party being crashed, looking for this new identity, seeking it through religion and seeing these Taliban guys. And we thought these guys are like Sahaba, right? Like the companions of the Prophet, alayhi salam.
This happened because of a house party that was crashed by your uncle.
Right. This happened by a house
With,
party.
like rocket-propelled grenades and all of this stuff. You're in the middle of like you're in Kuwait and all these places as a result of. Oh wow. Okay. That's an amazing.
Yeah, I think what it is that in my like choosing the Tabligh Jamaat was easy for me because I had been familiarized through my father taking me to the Medina Mosque where every Saturday nights they would have the big bayan by the big Maulana, right? And they all have tea and biryani afterwards, right? And so through that milieu, it's like for this kid facing this trauma moment. Of like, oh, how am I going to make this up to so the shame and guilt, those things are two things, I'm sure Armin will, pick up on that. Like, these are two things that religion uses especially, right? And Indo-Pak Desi culture, we like to say even more so, right? But, there's a whole joke about like, what do you mean? Have you heard of Jewish guilt? Like, there's a whole, so everybody's got that guilt thing. And for me, this is what propelled me to go to India, Pakistan. Walking around this area, seeing these guys, and
one of the things, like you talk about shame and guilt. I think one of the things about Pakistan and those societies is that the shame is a much bigger deal than the guilt. I mean, there is shame has this public, we're going to expose you and humiliate you. There's that element. Guilt can still be sort of just personal and internal.
Right.
So that the shame aspect is very powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful. Yeah. So basically I had this chance encounter with them, and they came back to the mosque that we were staying at, and we talked to them a little bit, and the whole idea was, the izzah of the ummah is in jihad, right? The honor and dignity of the Muslim nation is in jihad,
right?
And that is the jihadist worldview, what we call jihadist with lowercase j. That's their worldview. Everything gets filtered through the verses of the Quran that talk about fighting the few, the fewer that there are, that becomes the prism through which they see everything. The battles that were fought, even though, they lasted a handful of years through all the years of the prophetic period anyway, they focus on that. So for them, for me even, who was there, I needed this new identity. I think I was drawing from the militancy from the Army cadets, the obvious Indian Muslim background, whatever, and this seemed to be a natural course for me. So when I came back, because of my political talk, I left the Tabligh Jamaat, and I actually linked up with some local Salafi types that were around the area.
So this is you. Now you've come back to Toronto.
Now I've come back to Toronto. Yeah.
All right.
And now I'm intrigued by this, jihad and like fighting the kuffar, right? Because that's what these guys were telling us, that this is what we're doing.
Kuffar,
right? And
just for the people that don't know,
kuffar, anyone not Muslim, anyone. Yeah, it's used as a wide catch-all term. Right. Sometimes in Britain they use it as a slur. They say the kuffs, right?
Ex-Muslims, a lot of ex-Muslims wear it with as a badge of honor.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I've seen in my own dealings with military, whatever, like they wear kafir. Some of them have it tattooed on them, right? I got issues with that, obviously, but we can get to that. But the point is that this is a label that is used to just smear anybody and everybody. It justifies killing you, so on and so forth. So, I came back, and at the end of '95 is when the Taliban really came to prominence and power in Afghanistan. And so I took that as a validation of their worldview, right? They did what they said that they were going to do. So as I joined up with these Salafi types who were a lot more about the jihad, the biggest cause was the Chechen War, which started in 1995-96, the invasion of Grozny. And so this was a time when the first jihadi videos came out. It was on CD called the Russian Hell series. And it had basically videos of these Wahhabi fighters, militants in Chechnya who were committing roadside bombings, ambush attacks. I saw my first beheading video. This is like mid-90s, right? Then by 98, guy named Osama bin Laden, maybe you guys heard of him, right? Came out and declared his fatwa against the Jews and Crusaders. Right. And so now I want to take a pause here because This whole time, what's been happening is in high school, I'm talking to this girl who is a goth chick, right? She had dreadlocks. She was wearing cherry docks. She got a bunch of tattoos. And I went away. So after high school was done, basically, because that high school party that I had, and then the next year I was done, I went on this crazy trip. And I came back. When I came back in the summer of 95, I linked up with some of my friends from high school, whatever. But now I had a big beard. I was wearing a black turban and long robes, right? The look, right?
Yeah.
So the girl that I was friends with, we're just friends, she became really interested in, like, well, how did this guy go from this to that? And then became intrigued, and we started talking about religion, blah, blah, blah. And she was at the time reading two things. One was Rumi, the Sufi poet, Rumi, R-U-M-I. He's, the West understand him, through a Western lens, we'll say. But Rumi is known as the poet of love. And another book called Raja Yoga, which was Hindu philosophy by the author Vivekananda. And so my Salafi dawah, and by dawah I mean evangelism. So the preachy types, right? The Zakir Naik, the Ahmadidas, the debaters,
Dawah means invitation, right?
Invitation to Islam, right? For us to preach. And so the whole point was that so I was giving her dawah about Islam, and I don't know how it worked out, but basically we were talking about some of the minutiae of the ideology, and you know what? I said to her, like, if your ideas were a little different, I would propose marriage to you. And then she was just like taken aback, and but she said yes. She's like, okay, I think I could do this marriage thing with you. And so in 1998, this is where I stopped. It's almost like a split life I'm leading, right? Because I'm hanging around with all these, ill-intentioned Muslim dudes, but at the same time, I've met this girl. So she's Polish. She converts to Islam, and in 1998 we get married. Now, so when I stopped in 98, remember I talked about Bin Laden emerging at this time with his fatwa against the Jews and Crusaders. I also went on this crazy honeymoon trip with my wife, new wife. And I think, and I say here in my journey, that I think a great part of my intimacy needs had been met at that time. And so I think that calmed me down a bit, or at least solidified me and then prevented the acceleration into radicalization. And so I went on this trip. We did Ramadan, the last 10 days of the fasting month in Mecca and Medina. We went to Egypt. We did the tourist thing in Egypt. We went through the bus trip to Jerusalem, watched the sunrise from Masada, which is an ancient Jewish fortress, and visited all the holy sites there. Went to the Kotel, the wall where the Jews pray, with my Canadian passport. This is pre 9/11, of course, so I'm still in my beard, my turban, and my robes. And I had a great cross-cultural experience. Went to the Yad Vashem, saw the Holocaust Memorial there. And so my wife, being Polish, totally understood the significance of that. And so we had a really positive experience at that time in 98. But I wasn't fully out. I kept it up a couple more years. And what that entailed was recruiting other people to this jihadi dawah. Right, the idea that the only way izzah and dignity and honor is going to be brought to the Muslim ummah is through jihad. So then 9/11 happens, and it totally, of course, ends people's lives, changes a lot of things. And for me, that day was very pivotal. I realized that, wait a second, I get the whole jihad against the kuffar thing, but the planes into buildings, I don't understand. Does not compute. And so so this is when
go ahead. Go on.
Well, so another point. So this is when I realized I need to study Islam more. This is when I ended up in Syria to study Islam, Arabic and Islamic studies. I spent a couple of years there, 2 years only. Got sick of it, got out. basically, this is really where I had my de-radicalization moment, where a Sufi Sheikh was able to basically finally guide me through out of this extremist interpretations of Quran or Hadith or all of these things. I'm sure we'll get into it.
Yeah.
A complete 180 system of interpretation, the methodology that was applied to, making rulings, quote unquote, or making laws in an Islamic state, however, wherever we want to go with it. But complete 180. I realized, this is no good. I'm going to go back home to Canada. Newfound appreciation for the rights that we have in the West. Come back to Canada. The first week that I'm back, front page of the paper, the first Canadian has been arrested on terrorism charges. Post 9/11 laws. His name, Mubin Khawaja. Mubin Khawaja was arrested in connection with the 2004 London fertilizer bomb plot in the UK. Mubin Khawaja sat beside me in the madrasa I went to as a kid.
Holy shit.
We were friends. We used to play Hot Wheels cars with each other. I'll never forget 940 Caledonia Road, apartment 808. That's where they used to live, and I played with them. So I see him in the paper, and I look through the article, and I see a reference to Canadian Security Intelligence Service. And so I go to that thing called the phone book. Remember that?
The phone book.
Went to the back pages.
Yeah.
Big pages, that's right.
Yeah.
And the white pages is where the government listings were.
Right.
And I found Canadian Security Intelligence Service. I picked up the phone and I called them. And I said, hey, I know this guy that's been arrested. Now, unbeknownst to me at the time, the mandate of CSIS is different from the RCMP. They don't do public prosecution.
RCMP, for people who don't know,
Yeah,
the Royal Canadian. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's how I was going to give the... So you have Canadian Security Intelligence Service, and then you have the Federal Police, which is the RCMP, which stands for Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And they have what are called Integrated National Security Enforcement Teams. This is, for the U.S. Listeners, this is what a JTTF is, a Joint Terrorism Task Force. And in the U.S., the FBI does both. What Canada does, the CSIS role and the RCMP role, the FBI does both. In the UK, MI5 does what CSIS does, and Scotland Yard and Met Police do what the RCMP do. All right, so this is an intelligence service that collects information versus a police service which collects evidence for public prosecution. Right, two very different streams. So I basically I am what's called a walk-in to the intelligence service, somebody who initiates contact, and basically the intelligence officer came to see me, recruited me, basically told me, listen, we'd love to have you work for us. You tell us who you consider to be the threat or a threat to Canadian national security, and who is it? Why and why not? Simple. And so I actually worked undercover for 2 years. In other cases, and all I can say is that they were internet chat room infiltration operations and human networks infiltration. So this is a guy, tell us what he's about, tell us what he's doing. And my job is to go in and basically find out what's going on. So I did that actually for 2 years. And then one day I was given another file. They said, look, who are these guys? Tell us what they're about. So at the end of 2005, I went to go see what was up. Ended up infiltrating this group of guys who had plotted, or a core group of guys among a larger group, the core group plotting catastrophic attacks in Toronto. Now, there's a whole debate and questions on, did their reach exceed their grasp? I would say yes, it did. But that's not the test in law. They had a guilty intention, they had a guilty action, and so they were found guilty. So
this is the famous.
So this is the Toronto 18 case, right?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't know.
Toronto
This is a
case.
famous case, which basically you helped bring it down. Like this, I remember seeing this in the paper, and I was very proud. Like I was very happy. They're like, yeah, I felt actually very safe at that point. I didn't know I didn't know you. I didn't know the details,
Good.
and I felt like living in Canada. and like it seems like we're being protected. And I felt like our government is very effective. This was stopped before anything happened, and I really felt like somebody's taking care of us. So, thank you for doing that.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we can get into the whole thing about how, I remember saying, I mean, I won't spend too much time on this because there's just one other segment I want to mention, but there was a whole thing about my motivations. I really went into it altruistic. I believe that Islam is completely against terrorism and the role of the Muslim is to stop it. I regret nothing. Of course, I would have wished if things could have been done differently, maybe we could have done that, but I would do it again because keeping people safe. This is the Islam that I follow anyway. So anyways, in 2006, this 8-month investigation was concluded. 18 people were arrested. Eventually, so 18 people were arrested in 2006. There were then 5 legal hearings over 4 years, 2 in 2007, a judge trial in 2008, an abuse of process motion in 2009. This is where the arguments of entrapment are heard and was summarily dismissed, of course. It was impossible for there to be entrapment because these guys had already had...
Can you explain that a little bit for people that don't understand what you're talking about?
Yep. So entrapment comes up in cases of undercover criminal investigations or criminal investigations using undercover operations. They've mostly been used in drug cases where a person, a cop will go to somebody and say, hey, buddy, go to that house and get me, buy me some crack or whatever it is. And it's like, look, if you don't go, you know what I mean? I'm going to get the cops on you, or like uses a threat on a person and makes somebody do something that they would not normally do. That's entrapment. Okay. Right. So to make somebody do what they would not normally do by making threats or by making false promises, that's called entrapment.
This is already underway, right? I mean, this is...
Well, so the thing is that these guys already had their plot underway. They had decided the targets, the locations, the members of their group was already selected, all before I got involved. So in 2009, there was the entrapment hearing that was dismissed, and in 2010, a jury trial. So I basically went through the entire legal spectrum that you could go through, from preliminary hearings to judge trial to jury trial. During this time, I completed a master's degree in policing, intelligence, and counterterrorism. And this is when I started to realize that, hey, there's this topic called radicalization. There were all these other cases happening at the same time. The Boston Marathon bombings, the 2005 London subway bombings. So really, 2003 to 2006 and 7 is when you started to get that first wave of domestic jihadist terrorist plots.
Yeah, with al-Awlaki, right? Like,
Anwar al-Awlaki, right, being one of the... In fact, we sat... the Toronto group, we sat in the tent when we went on our little jihadi training camp, and we watched and listened to Anwar al-Awlaki, right? So...
Before you move on, regarding the entrapment thing, I just want to mention that I do think that it's a good thing that the government, there are people in the government that are trying to defend even these people, right? Like, I'm wondering if you agree with that, because we look at it like, oh, that was a ridiculous argument. It was dismissed very fast. It wasn't entrapment. But I do think that it's good to live in a country where there are people that are even defending, like, it's human rights, right? Like,
yes, right.
So
yeah, even they have rights, of course.
Even they have rights, and the fact that whether or not this was entrapment or not, the fact that was examined,
even heard,
investigated. That's a good thing. It's a good thing that we live in a country that was investigated. Yeah,
absolutely. And my position was always, I did nothing wrong. I mean, I gave them a lot of chances,
right?
Even to the point where, like, the police were like, Sheikh, we don't really, you shouldn't do that or whatever. But, I took it under advisement and kind of did my own thing.
Didn't the prosecutors in the case also think that you were sympathetic to some of the defendants?
I was deemed a hostile witness in the. So what happened was there were 14 adults and 4 young offenders. And in the Canadian system, the young offenders get their legal hearings sooner. So the young offender, the youth preliminary hearing brought 4 individuals up for examination. After my very sympathetic testimony, 3 of them, the prosecution was stayed against them, meaning that the prosecution decided, forget it, there's no reasonable prospect for conviction. They've spent a few months in prison, right? I think they learned their lesson. They were 14 years old, man. Like they really were not involved in the plot. They were just dupes who were suckered to be there. But the one guy had been doing a few more things than everybody else, so he continued to go to trial. And in that youth trial, when they bring up the situation of the other youth, because what happened was such a stupid thing. The prosecutor tried to hammer me on the fact that I gave 2 explanations for why we were cleaning up all the material that we had used, in the camping area. Now, we told them that, it's so that the chipmunks and squirrels don't choke on the bullet casings, right? Like, we were trying to be, environmentally friendly a little bit. Can I say that? Eco-friendly,
like
terrorists.
So you were blowing up. You were planning
kill
to
the kuffar, but save the squirrels.
Yeah.
Right?
So they were planning to. Okay, this is important. So they were planning to do an explosion and kill a whole bunch of innocent people. But hey, let's be careful with the environment and not
This is the most Canadian.
This is Canadian terrorism.
The one that infiltrated the terrorists more than you probably was the Canadian environmentalist.
No, it was more of a facetious comment, and I know it was to. So the real reason was to get rid of the evidence, right? As far as they were concerned. Now, in my head, it was, let's all gather everything together, take it back with us, and we'll go somewhere and we'll dump it, which is what we did. But me doing this knowing that there's a surveillance team behind us, I deliberately took this to a strip mall area where there's a lot more vehicular traffic so that the cover team could blend in. That was the reason, right? That I took all... So that I don't know what was wrong with that prosecutor trying to say that, I was trying to give the court 2 different reasons, and it wasn't that. I told the people one thing, those guys, but I'm telling you guys now the real reason. So it was ridiculous. But what happened was the people who were against Mubin Shaikh, who felt that Mubin Shaikh was responsible for all this, they just read, see, even the Crown Attorney is accusing him of lying. Not realizing that it was lying to protect the youth, right? So anyways, regardless of that, the young offender was found guilty, of course, but the way that our legal system is set up, that if you spend time in custody awaiting trial, you will get double the credit for that. So if you spend 6 months pretrial custody and you get sentenced to 1 year, you walk out. So that day that kid was found guilty, he walked out the front door of the court.
Oh, what?
Right.
So, yeah, because he got his time served. I think it was 6
Why
years.
Is it double? What's the logic behind the double?
I don't know. I don't know the logic behind it, but that's just the way it happened. So, so I wanted to talk. I mean, just on that entrapment point, that they went through all these arguments, but
So let's think. Sorry, what happened in your story after?
Yep. So now we're at 2010. All the court cases done. I am now just a free person. What was I going to do now? I can't really just become an accountant or something. This has defined my life.
Right.
So I just ran with it. Right. And so I started reaching out to different experts and talking to them and understanding what's going on. Now, 2010 is the start of the Syrian war. And 2012 is the Arab Spring, so-called Arab Spring.
Right.
And what's happening is I become a public person. I start Facebook, Twitter, whatever, and basically
wasn't that 2011, the Arab Spring? Wasn't that 2011?
Yeah, 2011, 2012.
Yeah, around that time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, I basically start to see the rise of ISIS in real time. So basically from 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, really. Okay, because I'm very exact on this. 2012, 13, 14, and 15, was the ISIS social media heydays. All right, to 2015. I'll give him even to 2016, but it was in this time that I went back onto Twitter, Facebook, found their networks, went back into their networks, sometimes with some fake accounts that I had set up as lures, so that they would recruit me, and I was very successful in that. And I had my own personal account that I did where I would try to directly challenge these guys using Islam, using my interpretation of Islam or the Sufi understanding and interpretation, going to the same Quranic verses, the same hadith, all these things, and engaging in an ideological battle with them, using the same. So like my handle was Caliphate Cop, right? I said traffic cop in the caliphate of Jesus Christ, right? Alayhi salam, right? Because I knew that they were going to declare a caliphate. As soon as they started calling themselves Dawla Islamiyya fil Iraq wa Sham, I knew that all they got to do is, so Dawla Islamiyya, Islamic State, fil Iraq wa Sham means in Iraq and the Levant.
Yeah.
All right? So Daesh, Dawla Islamiyya fil Iraq wa Sham, the acronym of the Arabic letters, D-A, right, Daesh.
The Ain.
Right, the Ain.
Yeah.
So I knew that they were going to call themselves Dawla Islamiyya, just Islamic State. And the only way that they could one-up Al-Qaeda and Taliban that they were trying to do, because in this jihadist Olympics, right, you have these different guys, right? Well, they're all the same, but so they're all the same team, but different players. So Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and the best that the Taliban could do was an imara, an emirate of Afghanistan, and the only one level above that is Khilafah.
Right.
So anyway, so I became very involved in that. There was some, I'll say, operational use for some of the stuff that I did. Listen, some guys got tracked and some guys got whacked. And I always say,
what do you mean whacked?
I tried to skim over that one. But
Okay.
no, I had an ongoing relationship with military services, others who were tracking these people, and doing what had to be done with them. So I did that for a number of years.
Wait, so you're responsible for some of these people being tracked down?
I definitely am. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
And whacked as well.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Well, look. At the end of the day,
do you have a tear
tattoo
tattoo for each one of them that were taken? Okay.
Well, I've been watching Into the Badlands lately, and Sonny's got all the kill tattoos on the back. No, look, I don't have blood on my hands.
Mm.
And
Just on your keyboard.
Yeah, like that I've killed anyone, but maybe you know what I can say? Can I say it? I'm definitely in the kill chain. I'm definitely in the kill chain that individuals have been like. I don't. It sounds like I'm bragging or being arrogant about it, and I'm not doing that. I'm not claiming any kind of I'm not stolen valor.
It actually seems the opposite. It seems like you're hesitant to want to be responsible for anyone dying. So it seems actually the opposite. Yeah.
I am. Look, I don't feel remorse if I am responsible for any of these demons who are doing what they're doing in the name of Islam. Being, my it's not even a joke. I train special forces. I literally train the people who go and do the door knocking. Okay, and I tell them, and this is Trump country that I go into and I do this. Okay, I say only Allah can judge the jihadists. Your job is to arrange the meeting. Simple. All right.
Okay. Wow.
So anyways, so I did a bunch of things in that time. And and so now my business partner right now, I'll plug in my website, fusionintel.com, fusionintel.com. I work with the ex-CIA guy who was a dude who did a number of things. And so since then, basically 2016 to now, I've been involved in a lot of now higher level stuff at strategic levels with generals and diplomats and whatever else. And basically my angle, I take the pro-Islamic approach and a very utilitarian approach. And that's really what because I'm obviously sensitive to this whole thing, ex-Muslims, atheists, like how do you deal with that? And so the approach that I'm going to use is basically a utilitarian one, that at the end of the day, I don't think we're going to get anywhere with demonizing Islam and Muslims. And I think there is a lot of times an overlap between the two. I know some people try to separate, let's say, religious belief. And I get that. I have friends who do happen to be atheists, and they believe what I believe is complete nonsense. And I'm the same way with the atheists, right? I mean, believing that, things just came randomly and there isn't a programmer behind all the I think this is absurd to believe that, right? So, but that's okay. We can deal with that as beliefs and ideas. But I think where we will agree, obviously, is going to be on basic human dignity and human rights, right? At the human level.
So I have a question with regards...
the ability to have that conversation.
So let me just finish actually all of this and wrap up my chronology of growing up.
I'm going to be fighting with Ali because
Yeah.
I have so many questions. I'm going to try to get in, and Ali is going to have his own questions.
No, Armin, go for it. Go
No.
for it. I have one major question that's pending, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, can I just close the? I'm a little impulsive here. Just to close the chronology of growing up, having this thing, going over, coming back, Syria, ISIS time, and government time, and then ISIS time. And so now I'm just a public person, commenting on these issues and other work here and there. So back to you.
Wait, so when you say demonizing and Islam and Muslims, and you just put it together as if it's a two thing, but then you clarified that you recognize that it's different. But you think do you think demonizing Islam leads to and demonizing Muslim? You kind of still see it as this if it's the same thing. Do you really feel?
Well, some people don't separate the two. I mean, they conflate the two, right? And some people they at least try to be intelligent enough to try to separate that. But I do think that we have to be taught, right, to do this. I think if we just leave people if we just attack Islam, if Islam is attacked, then I think for some people it's natural to transpose the contempt and the sentiments you may have of Islam, that thing, onto the people who would subscribe to that thing. But it's natural.
How is what you're saying different from saying, I think Muslims are being a Muslim leads to people becoming terrorists, and you say no, you have to separate Muslims from terrorism. Yeah, I understand that. I know it can, but
it can lead to
terrorism. But do you think that do you see how when people demonize an entire group of people like Muslims, right? You see that as a wrong thing, and we agree with you on that. So if we can separate that, why can't you do the same thing from when it comes to people that are attacking Islam, and separate that from people that are demonizing Muslims, even though you see their similar language being used sometimes there, but
I can tell the difference.
You can tell the difference, right?
I can tell the difference.
But I'm just saying, grouping these two people together is not in the best interest of Muslims themselves, because I think it helps the people that are demonizing Muslims if they come off as bigger and a stronger enemy, right? And it helps the radical Muslims to show to Muslims how much they are hated if everybody that is criticizing Islam seen as an enemy to Muslims. It helps the radical Muslims to see like everybody is against you.
Right.
And it also shuts down, like you just said, you think atheism is ridiculous, right?
Right.
I don't see that as a personal attack on me. But that, but that could be seen as demonizing atheism, what you just said. But demonizing atheism is fine as long as it's not demonizing atheists. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't even. Okay, well, and then I see what you're saying, and I agree mostly. And I would just say that, like, for example, if you were to, let's say to say something like, I think this belief is ridiculous. then there's no demonization, right? It's when you start to say people who believe this, they want to, take over the world, or they want to kill you, right? Like that would be demonizing, right?
But that's the people, though. That's the people, not
we
the.
agree on that.
I know. There's something here that we disagree on. I just want to point to it. I don't know how to take it out and highlight it. It just seems like it's kind of.
I think. Okay, let me say this. It is not. It is okay. So somebody, an atheist who is ridiculing Islam, is not demonizing Muslims by doing that.
No.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. But if they portray Islam in a way that brings fear into somebody about, if you're talking about this fearful thing called Islam, then I'm going to make the argument, or I've said that some people will naturally conflate that with Muslims. Of course, that's an erroneous conflation.
Right.
But some people will do that. Some people will say, well, okay, if Islam is out to kill me,
right,
then that person over there who believes in that Islam, I should view them as someone who wants to kill me.
In practice, no. In practice, it's the opposite, because when people that don't hate Muslims attack Islam and ridicule it, mock it, say shit about it, if people observe that these are also the same people that befriend Muslims and hang out with Muslims and get along with Muslims, if they observe that, then that would lead to the conclusion that I could be against this idea without hating an entire group of people.
Sure.
But
where you can have that.
Yes, but if you take out all the people, that can shit on Islam while getting along with Muslims, if you take out all those groups of people, then you're actually helping with that conclusion, because now you notice that all the people that are shitting on Islam are also the people that hate all Muslims. So taking out the people that shit on Islam and get along with Muslims actually helps do what you're suggesting.
Well, the thing is, you're going to have both types of people, right? I mean,
yes, so that's why you're gonna have both types of people. That's why you need people that don't hate Muslims to openly shit on Islam. Because if they don't, then the only people that are shitting on Islam are the people that hate Muslims. Bigots. They get the monopoly on shitting. Don't give the monopoly on shitting on Islam to the people that are bigots.
I want to add one thing here. I think. Sorry, I got choppy. Yeah. I want to add one thing here that I think Mubin was trying to say, which I agree with, is that if you go out, especially in this atmosphere nowadays, and if you just go out and put out an attack on Islam, the religion, and assume that everybody's going to know the difference between attacking an ideology and demonizing people, then that's not going to work. I think it's very important for people who go out and even if they attack the Islamic ideology, not to leave that attack out there without actually qualifying it that this is not and explaining that difference over and over to people.
Well, okay.
We
do that all the time, right? So, for example, we attack.
All right, I'm putting one stone aside for you here now. All right.
One stone. No, but for example, we attack China for the treatment of Muslims. We attack. So we go out and do that. But I don't think you need to do that every time you attack Islam. In fact, every time you attack Islam, you might be attracting some of the bigots, which then get exposed to you defending Muslims. And I do think that if you are trying to, which is good, we do have a lot of conversion of bigots to just critics of Islam. We do see that change. We do notice a lot of people that used to. We have people that used to say just nuke all of the Middle East already, right? And now they're saying that actually, okay, I'm not against Muslim, I'm against Islam, right? So we are seeing those people change their tune. That does happen. I know some of them are for show, okay? I know some of them are just pretending, but there's some genuine ones in them as well.
Yeah, you can't see through them all.
It's a slog. It's slow. But anyway, I want to move on from this, and so I think that's kind of settled.
All right.
But Maybe, and so just moving
I'll
back,
hit my
I wanted
pipe.
to. Oh, sorry. Yeah, just wanted to talk about some of the insights you got into the mindset of these people, because that really is I think, something that you know more about than the majority of people. And I want to start with the thing you said about your marriage to the goth girl. Is you said that your intimacy needs were met, so your radicalization level decreased. And we know about all of these, the hadith about the 72 virgins, and there's a lot of, there is this element of, there's gender segregation in a lot of conservative Islamic societies, and they use sex as a recruiting tool. How important is that in the mindset of these people, that, okay, I'll kill myself when I'm 14 at the height of puberty, at the height of hormones? I mean, is sort of a get a brother laid campaign, would that be effective in fighting?
I heard about this.
In fighting jihad? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a whole joke about actually just like dropping off a bunch of prostitutes in the, ISIS territory, but they'd probably like cut them up and stuff, right? So I mean, look, so there is definitely a role that is to be played with that, and you can look at really, I guess, majority human culture, which is pretty much patriarchal, and where there's patriarchy, there tends to be misogyny. And so you find this, whether you want to call them gender role stereotypes. And I made a joke about this once at a Boston Society for Terrorism Research conference, where I said it's like a form of sexual nihilism, right? The only way I can get my virgin in paradise is after I've blown myself up here on Earth, right? And I did make that joke sometimes, is that these guys just got to get laid, or they just need to be touched by a girl, or a lot of these guys, is there also this incel, level of jihadism,
well, they're
right?
going to strip clubs the night before 9/11, right? I mean, there's
is that
always
virgin thing actually a major motivation? I think, isn't that a myth that's a major motivation?
Well, there's different contexts. So Robert Pape, he's talking about Robert Pape's stuff, where he looked at Palestinian suicide bombers, and I would say that in certain contexts, particular things have been raised. So whether in the, let's say, Palestinian militant camps or the Afghani Taliban camps, they both talk about Huriya in Jannah, in paradise. Right. So I would not so much say that it is a sole driver, but it is one of the, let's call them, fluffy bows that's put out there in that larger narrative, right?
Right. But I think like the main motivations, correct me if I'm wrong, is like a sense of meaning, a sense of significance, a sense of belonging to a movement, rather than like people don't like, it's not like, yeah, I'm gonna go, I'm doing this because I want to get laid in the afterlife. Like that's
sure.
Yeah.
So let me say this. So there's one quote by Peter Newman, and it goes, "Ideology without grievances doesn't resonate. And grievances without ideology are not acted upon." Okay, ideology without grievances doesn't resonate, and grievances without ideology are not acted upon.
That's perfect.
Brilliant.
Right?
Yeah,
it is.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And now,
sorry, who said this? Can you?
So this is Peter Neumann, like Neumann. Yeah, he's a very well-known scholar, and expert. Now, my quote is: "Sometimes religious ideology is indeed a driver, but at other times just a passenger with other psychosocial factors at the wheel." Okay?
Yeah.
So now when you talk about sense of meaning, belonging, and identity, I ask the question, can that be separated from religious ideology? Because for that young Muslim kid, think about it. Your paradigm is defined, is constructed by religious belief.
Right.
Right? Your sense of meaning, what is that linked through? What is that filtered through? It's interpreted through religion, right?
Yeah.
So, right. So when I hear this a lot, and it's true. I could totally say in hindsight that I felt like I was part of the ummah, the mujahideen of the ummah, right? This I'm part of a special group. I'm purer than everybody else. And these are common traits that are found in other extremist type groups. White supremacists, exact same thing. Sense of meaning and belonging to the greater white brotherhood. We're the, we're the protectors. So
Graham Wood. Graham Wood was on this podcast.
Yeah.
And
I met with him.
Yeah, and he told us about when he met Richard Spencer, who he went to high school with, and Richard Spencer had actually, sort of, like I said, paraphrasing here, but he'd actually said that, he'd praise. He's like, look at ISIS, they're getting together, they're organizing so well because they believe in identity and they believe in, all that. And there was an actual sort of reluctant kind of admiration for him, which is an amazing story.
Well, the two of them exist in like symbiotic union, right?
So
especially white supremacist anti-Muslims and jihadists, they exist in symbiotic union.
Yeah. Armin has a question.
How much do you find the Quran and the way the Quran is written responsible for these jihadists?
Well, I go back to what the Prophet ﷺ, we learned through the hadith on the Khawarij. And the Khawarij are an ancient sect that was mentioned by the Prophet.
Yep.
And certain qualities about them. And specifically, the common phrase that appears in multiple ahadith is that they would recite the Quran, but it would not go beyond their throats. Okay, we can talk about how that's interpreted, whether that meant that they were literalists, that it was just on their tongue, it wasn't in their hearts, but they would quote the Quran. That was their number one thing that they would do. Right. And there were a number of other attributes. One of them, for example, another one was they were hyper worshippers. So there's a report that says, you will belittle your prayers and fasting in front of their prayer and fasting. So I think back to the Westgate Mall attacks in Kenya done by Al-Shabaab. And in the middle of this, hijacking, the guy stops to read his 2 rak'ah salah in the middle of the hijacking.
So yeah, just to be very clear. So the Khawarij, neither the Sunni or the Shias like the Khawarij, they were So they were some extremist group that started
terrorists.
They were the terrorists at the time. They were takfiring everybody. But the ISIS and Al Qaeda, they don't see them. They see themselves as Sunni. They don't see themselves as part of the Khawarij. So I understand that. I understand that a lot of the things that they do, ISIS and Al Qaeda, like you could be like, oh, that's like what the Khawarij used to do. But I'm specifically talking about the text in the Quran. Do you think any of that, the way it's written at all, is responsible for any of these? Of
course, it's so this is the whole point, that the Khawarij were known to appeal to the Islamic scriptures to justify their killing and slaughter.
And do you think the Quran allows that kind of, that kind of justification?
No, doesn't.
But does it? Can you at least say that it was written in a way that that somebody could get that out of it?
Well, of course. I mean, it's any part of it. I mean, any part that you chop out, you can use it and justify it, for your purpose.
For the sake of this podcast, I'm not going to go into like theological discussion with you, but I would like to have you on. I would like to have you on a different show if you're ever interested to do that with you.
Yeah,
I'd actually want to bring in one of our patron comments now because it's relevant to this. It's from Vikram Parahu. He's saying, you mentioned that Islam is anti-terrorism. ISIS members would say that Islam promotes terrorism. How do you figure out which one is the correct interpretation of the text? Because I mean, a lot of these. I mean, there's a lot of these ISIS guys are obviously, some of them are illiterate, but there are many of them that are actually quite learned.
There is a great video on YouTube. It's over an hour long. I mean, I think it's like a 15-minute intro. So it's called "Refuting ISIS." All right, "Refuting ISIS." And it's by a Syrian scholar by the name of Muhammad al-Yaqubi. It's my pinned tweet at Mr. Mubin Shaikh. And I think this is hands down one of the best responses to ISIS from the Islamic perspective, specifically on how do you know who is following the scripture correctly. Now, it's a longer video, that lecture that he does, and he goes into specific, he goes into a lot of detail. But basically, there are specific things that have been mentioned that you cannot do in war. So when I train the military, basically one of the guys who is doing the Islam 101 training for special forces in the U.S. And part of my training that I give in there is I show them these things, right? The verses that are used and what the, so for example, I say jihad is the Islamic war tradition with rules of engagement. Terrorism is to jihad what war crimes are to ROEs. So for example, when Abu Bakr, the first caliph, writes and says, you can't kill children, not the elderly, you cannot burn trees, we then ask, if you can't burn a tree, can you burn a human being in a cage, like ISIS did with that Jordanian pilot? No, you can't. If Abu Bakr says, and you will pass by people who have devoted their lives to monastic services, leave them alone. So we would use these texts to show this is how you guys go sideways. One other quick example, there's one verse in the Quran, let not your dislike for a people cause you to be unjust. And there's a commentary to that verse, and one of the medieval commentators, Qurtubi, I think he's writing in the 1300s, 1200s. He says there's a verse about reciprocity in fighting. So, and he says, the commentator says that even if they kill our women and children to cause sorrow and grief to befall us, it is not permitted for us to do the same likewise to them, right, to cause them to feel. So the point is, that you cannot just, right, if the enemy, if you believe, if ISIS says that the West is killing ISIS civilians, therefore ISIS has the right to retaliate by killing civilians. There is no rule that allows this.
That's not what they say, though. A lot of them say it's because even if they didn't kill us, we will still kill you because you're the kafir.
We can go on to the reasons why
okay, but I just want to add this for our audience because I don't want to get into too much theology. Before the problem with the hadith and the Quran is that you could find examples for anything, like any position that you want. Like I don't think so.
I don't think it's that easy.
Hold on, like I know the examples that you mentioned. There are millions of other examples. Not millions. Like there are hundreds of other examples of stuff that we could use to counter what you just said when it comes to justifying. I understand that there's not like outright violence on everybody. There's some rules to it, but there's a lot
of qualifiers.
There are a lot of qualifiers,
and this is what
I call it like organized evil rather than chaotic evil. There are a lot of ways to justify. There are a lot of other hadiths and verses to justify some acts of evil. Well, and I know me and you disagree on that, and that's a different discussion. Right.
Look, ultimately,
wait, Ali, you tell us.
Yeah, we will need to go into a whole other conversation on
right. So
it requires its own time.
I know, but I didn't want that just to be left there without me saying. But
sure.
But regarding your own deradicalization, to me it was very interesting. And this is something that me and a lot of people regarding reforming Islam, whether it's useful or not useful, whether we have huge disagreements and debate with our community over this, right? For me, it was very interesting that when 9/11 happened, it wasn't that you were reading the Quran or the Hadith that you all of a sudden saw something that you were convinced that this is not the right way in the Quran or Hadith. It was your own moral compass first changed. Your humanity, your humanistic views trumped over your radical views. And then after that, you went in search for ways to support your already existing humanist views. You know what I mean? You basically, your religion seems to be...
that was part of it. I think the Army cadet upbringing was part of it.
Yeah.
And you can tell when you see... I think there is something natural about that. When you see a plane going into a building is not a natural...
Right.
Part of the...
But it wasn't Islam.
So.
It wasn't... No, let me...
This question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to... I guess I wanted to phrase it simply because I think... the point he's making is an interesting one. Did you, when it came to de-radicalization, or what do you think about this? Do you think you were getting your sense of conscience, morality from the religion, or do you think you were using your inherent moral compass to interpret it in a way that was palatable to you?
Sure, but and I get that, but again, I'm this believer in this conditioning that we get through our childhood. So I grew up, I would say really that, where does one learn their moral compass, right? From the start. Like, you're gonna get it probably from your family, I think, right? That's and the thing is that I started going to madrasa from the age of 5, okay, and went straight every day until the age of 12, right? So that was a constant. Now let me say now. So in that time, do we really? I mean, there was some moral upbringing. I mean, we were taught, to be good, and there was a general. So I would say actually that my moral compass was tuned by religion very early on. And if anything, what happened, later, so after the 9/11 incident, is when I go over to Syria and I do the more intellectual approach to that. So I'm not trying to take away, because again, my situation is unique, or maybe there have been some people who went through a similar thing, but it's different from some other people, I would say, because it depends on your upbringing, right? If you've had a very cultural upbringing of Islam, let's say, where it's not, I mean, the practices, whatnot, the rituals and all that stuff may not be a major part, then I can see how that may not contribute to the moral compass as much.
You also acknowledge that your sense of sympathy, at least, is a natural thing that you have, right? So, but to me, it seemed like it's not your religion following your moral compass. It's not guiding your moral compass. To me, it seemed it worked the other way around. Your moral compass changes, and your religion adjusts accordingly.
Well, this is where the atheism clashes,
right?
Because I think for some atheists, they can't understand that religion is actually a driver for good, right? That a lot of Muslims do good because they are specifically motivated by religious ideology.
We used to be religious.
Sure. No. I get that. Yeah. And I know that. But I don't want to say that. I don't want to take away from your point, because I want to be open to it.
Right.
Because I do see this. For example, if you look at some radicalization trajectories, the radicalization happens before the religious indoctrination.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes that happens.
Right.
Where the socialization occurs before the ideological radicalization. And other times,
but as you pointed out, the ideology is required for it to turn into action. That's what you also mentioned.
Ideology without grievances doesn't resonate, grievances without ideology.
So you mentioned the role of ideology. So no, but go back to what you were saying regarding, when people do good things only because of their religion, we actually don't think they're doing really a good thing. They're just following commands. We think most Muslims and most Christians are actually good without their religion as well. That's actually a compliment to them. That's not us shitting on them.
That's like the argument of, can you achieve higher ethic and not even believe in God? And the answer is obviously yes, you can.
Yeah,
you can be a good person and be an atheist.
Yeah, but let me just make this point before I forget. And what I'm saying is that I don't think that if you take Muslims' religion away from them, they're going to be raping and killing and stealing tomorrow, right? I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that all of them are going to be like, there's going to be jumping off rooftops and
we can say this. We can say that in the the large mass, there is, sure, there are going to be some people whose human morality was there before any kind of label was put on it. I can understand that, because there are many good people in the world, and they're raising other good people, and it's not done through a religious ideology, right?
Right.
They don't say do this good because it's the right thing to do. they might say, oh, if you do this good, you'll get such and such reward in the next life, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you could just do it because it's good to do right then and there.
Armin, we gotta move on.
Do you acknowledge that when you became deradicalized, it wasn't because you just saw something in the Quran or Hadith that you're like, shit, I got it all wrong. The thing that made it click was you saw the inhumanity of it, and then you went to look for a different version of Islam.
Well, another way to psychoanalyze this is what they call psychology deprivation. So here's another way to do it. That 9/11 was an emotional trigger, right? Because you're seeing this act and you're seeing it as a bad thing, right?
Right.
And now I'm not going to answer why do I see it as a bad thing. Is it because my religion tells me? Because I knew even in the jihadi friendly mindset that this is not just that it was wrong, that it was unlawful to do, right? So it was very legalistic, which is again what the religion kind of does, right? And then I would say that emotional trigger hits a psychological point about me feeling that I am deprived of this knowledge. So what happened is this 9/11 attack happens, and I think to myself, how is it that I came to support these groups that produced this, right? Like, where did I go wrong? I started to think, that because wearing the beard and the robe why did I even think I as a Muslim needed to do that? Because we're told you're supposed to resemble the Prophet, alayhi salam, but they take it literally. Then they start growing a beard like him, wearing a clothes like him,
color red like him.
Yeah, exactly, right? So there was this. So I started to reevaluate. Why did I even come to believe all of these things? It wasn't just that one particular thing, but why I dressed the way that I dressed, and so on and so forth. And I would make it a point to say that what I learned in that time with those shuyukh, with those sheikhs, is how specifically that interpretation was wrong,
right?
And how it was against Islam.
That was a battle between your humanism and Islam internally within you, and to me that was humanism winning over Islam within you.
Well, the Sufism.
You see them as compatible, right?
That's the thing. I see them as compatible. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. So the Sufi thing is always like, there's a great Sheikh, Habib Ali Jifri, Habib, Habib, and then Ali, Ali, and Jifri, Jifri. And Habib Ali Jifri, and there's a great, he has a series of talks. Humanity over religion is one of them. And the Sufi line is all about that you can't achieve any kind of communion with the divine unless you are doing it with the creation.
One question: if you went to search for a different interpretation of Islam, and let's say you didn't find it, right? I know you found a way. Some people that told you actually, okay, this is
then I would leave Islam.
Then you would leave Islam. Perfect. So to me that means
Armin's have one stone for me.
No, to me that suggests that to me that suggests that because a lot of people,
your religion doesn't have that humanity in it, then you need a new religion.
No. To me, that's simple. Because a lot of people blame me and say, Armin, if you convince Muslims that this religion is barbaric, right? Then they're going to become barbaric. And I say I have more faith in Muslims than they do.
Guys, crosstalk, Armin.
I wasn't finished though.
Continue.
Hurry. Okay.
Wrap up really quickly.
Wrap up. I say I believe in Muslims more than most people do, because I think that if you convince Muslims that this religion is barbaric, they are not going to become barbaric, because they are not barbaric people. You said that if you were convinced that this was a barbaric religion, rather than following it, you would leave it. That's what that's
absolutely. Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Go on.
Okay. So, guys, I have to.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go
we
on,
got to
sir.
move on. We have 15 minutes left, and there are two other things that I want to talk about because I mean,
Yeah.
this is actually really interesting, and I would love to see a separate episode on this and even
Right.
be involved in it. But I wanted to know about. There are two other things that you did after the Toronto 18 case, right?
The ISIS returnee.
Yeah, the ISIS returnee. So this is a guy named Abu Huzaifa al-Kanadi, which means, I guess, Abu Huzaifa the Canadian, and that's a pseudonym for him, I guess, for
Yeah,
anonymity.
they call it a kunya, like a nom de guerre.
Yeah, no. So you got in touch with him, I think through. Well, you probably know Rukmini Kalimaki, right?
Yeah, so this would have been about 2017. Rukmini Kalimaki, New York Times reporter, did the amazing podcast Caliphate.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and Abu Huzaifa was featured in that as a central person. But at the time, what happened is she came up to Toronto and met with him and recorded all the stuff with him and messaged me and basically said, "Hey, Mubin, I just met with this guy here. I think you should talk to him."
Mm-hmm.
Now, so what happened is I, initiate contact with him, and I basically, what I'm trying to do is manage this guy's existence and presence among us, right? I'm going to find out what this guy's about, if he's a threat, isn't he a threat, why and why not. Not reporting to any agency. I mean, the police were on him already, CSIS was on him already, and if they could see that I was talking to him, well, then good. Because then, they're going through their motions. They're going to continue doing what they're doing in terms of surveillance and other, monitoring that they'll be doing of him. And I'm going to do my own thing. And my own thing entailed trying to find out where was this guy in his head? Where was his ideology? Is he basically just lying and trying to play it cool so that he can get away and just kind of fly below the radar?
So before you get into this, so he's somebody who he's a Canadian citizen.
So born in Pakistan, came here very early, grew up some years here, went back to Pakistan for, maybe a year, so an extended period, maybe a few months. I might not be perfect on the details, but went back to Pakistan for a period, came back, and then the second time when he went back again is where he took the opportunity to go from there to Turkey and then into Syria.
To join ISIS.
Fought
alongside ISIS, and then he was one of the returning Canadians.
So his role there. This was the whole thing about debate. I mean, he admitted that he was part of the internal security there. He admitted to murdering 2 people. He didn't admit any crimes to me. In fact, I made it a very clear at the beginning: don't admit any crimes to me because I don't want to be in that situation, and that's not what I'm here for. I had to put on a different hat. And I had to protect myself as well, because if he did, then if there was a court case, I get brought in and whatever. And I wanted to avoid that. So, but he did admit on the podcast of killing 2 people. He stayed there for a short period of time and supposedly escaped by hot wiring a motorbike and making his way to another border town. And then the Turkish authorities picked him up and then deported him back to Pakistan. He went on his Pakistani ID card, not on his passport, so there's no stamping, there's no documentation in the Canadian passport that he traveled. So that's why the police have not been able to charge him. Unfortunately, even admitting crimes on a podcast is not enough for a Canadian court, so they couldn't prosecute him that way.
What?
Yeah, insane, man, insane. I know. So he basically he panicked after the podcast went public. I tried to get him some media, exposure. Again, maybe it was my fault. I mean, I wanted to put it out there because there's all this talk about what do we do with these guys, and then there's a lot of theory, and then there's only a little bit of action. And so I was trying to kind of show that this is what we're dealing with. But when everything became public, he basically went 180 on me, declared me like I was a sellout. I'm a goofy Sufi. This is what they say to us.
Right? Goofy Sufi.
Goofy Sufi, right?
I love it.
Right.
I'm gonna use that actually.
Watch it. Okay.
Armin and the ISIS guy.
Yeah, this is how they denigrate us and whatnot. And a lot of stuff that I've heard before said to me anyway, but it just showed me how quickly this guy could go that 180. And it's because I always thought in the back of my mind that this guy's not telling me the truth. there's some things that there are ways that you can know, if the person is being truthful or just lying to you. And so we cut off ties. I don't contact him anymore. He doesn't contact me. He's dealing with the RCMP. So the RCMP are unable to prove that he went to Syria. Rukmini Kalimaki, geolocated him there based on a photograph. They had a whole team working on this. It's not good form to trash talk my own RCMP, on a foreign podcast. And I'm not going to do that.
We're not foreign, we're Canadian.
No.
Canadian.
Yeah, okay, good. That's right. Yeah, both of you are Canadian.
Yeah.
But still, the RCMP really, they have limitations, we'll say, and they're unable to prove that he went to Syria. So they're now just dealing with him as your average, if I can say that, your average kid who is supportive of ISIS but did not go. So he's now just kind of been put on a lesser tier, if you will.
Yeah.
Right.
Because on the higher tier, at least, we have what's called a peace bond, where an individual can be brought to the court, where we can't charge you with terrorism, but we believe that it's reasonably likely that you will engage in these sorts of things, and so we can force you to get counseling, to keep you off the internet, to make sure you go to school, wear an ankle bracelet. There are different things that they can make you do.
But isn't that like anti-free speech kind of stuff?
I don't know. I think it's sort of like, I get it. There's a whole thing about, because in fact, so if I just Aaron Driver, Aaron, Aaron, Driver, like the car, was a white guy from Winnipeg or Edmonton. And same thing. He was talking a lot of crap. He was right on the line. And they charged him on a peace bond. They got him on a peace bond. They went to court. His non-Muslim lawyer basically told the court, how dare you suggest that he get religious counseling? This is a secular court. You shouldn't even be talking about that.
Right, I agree.
Hold on. They said, okay, prosecution said, get him off the internet. They said, no, it'll make him more extreme if you do that by just cutting him off. That's like, okay. Then they said, put an ankle bracelet on him. Then the defense said, no, this is going to confine him unnecessarily, blah, 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 this and that. See where I'm going with this?
I kind of agree, though.
Hold on, Armin.
Right.
Gets on the peace bond. POS, what does he do? Gets online, finds bomb-making ingredients, goes to make the bomb, makes a bomb, releases a video on the internet saying, I'm blah, blah, blah. The FBI grab it, listen to it saying, this is a Canadian. They shoot it over to the RCMP. Some analyst is like, I know that voice. Where's Aaron Driver? You know where Aaron Driver was? In his driveway, in a taxi with 2 improvised explosive devices on his person, ready to go to a shopping mall in London to blow himself up.
Jesus.
And thank God, pardon the pun or take the pun.
Yeah, thank God.
No, we are offended.
They had to kill him. They had to kill him in the taxi.
Okay, but okay, so actually,
I'm not gonna talk about the counseling and this and that, but just goes to show that.
Yeah, but they stopped. But that's how you stop. That's how you stop them, by the way they did it.
Well, that's the ultimate. The best way to do it.
Yeah, but so many things that could have gone wrong.
I understand
everything
that,
went wrong, and the fact that we got to that point that we had to shoot this kid in the head. Maybe
okay, but that's
hold on.
It is the Sharia punishment.
Yeah, but that's not.
Terrorism.
But that's not a good justification for saying that, okay, because this kid became a terrorist and almost killed a whole bunch of people, that means that we get to bad opinions. Now we get to force you to do this, and even if you haven't committed a crime yet, we can get the government involved.
Yeah, this is the big debate, right? This is the big debate, because we don't want to wait until the crime has been committed.
Yeah, just put him on a watch list.
Late, right?
Just okay, it's not against the law to put the guy on a watch list and constantly monitor every single step. I think it's against basic.
Put him on an ankle bracelet, right?
No.
Confined him to a building.
Now you crossing. Now you're crossing a line. Now human rights.
I think that's just for public safety purposes, because
I gotta.
This is actually very interesting because
I gotta say one thing.
Yeah.
Like CSIS, my wife actually ended up on a Taliban kill list a few years ago.
Oh right. Okay.
Yeah, with the Lal Masjid thing in Pakistan. So we ended up getting just a whole bunch of death threats. We had to go, and she did an interview, and
they notify you if this stuff comes up. Yeah.
They
fact,
still call us.
That's all fine.
Yeah, I gave up
sure.
a lot of. Well, I mean, can I say this? Never mind.
But
So yes, they talk.
By
to
the way,
you
can I just point out how like I'm always accused of being an anti-Muslim extremist, bigot, Islamophobe, all that good stuff, diet Nazi, and you are a Muslim, right? And I just want to point out that I am actually on the side of, if even somebody comes and says like, hey, I believe Al Qaeda is saying the right thing, we should support an Islamic Caliphate, I am actually defending that guy's free speech and thinking that the government should not get in. I mean, they could put him on a watch list and follow him. I'm worried about that person, even that person's freedom. And our Muslim guest is saying, no, put a bracelet, put an ankle.
Yeah,
but
I'm just I mean, so I know what you mean. And you're allowed to believe these ideas, right? I mean, I get that. Like in the UK, they let these guys march up and down, right? Al-Muhajirun, calling for Khilafah, calling Al-Qaeda come and, hit the UK. Like, I would say that's a little bit too much. That's glorifying terrorism, or that's like inciting terrorism, right? But I understand, though, there is a line. Right. Sometimes the line is not so clear when it comes to, let's say, for example, somebody who CSIS will watch is one level, and who the police will watch is another level. Right. Right. I mean, there's a separation, and I know what you mean. Like, I would love to ban Salafi jihadis. All right, like ban it outright. Right. Like, but then it reminds me of that guy in Chechnya, right, Kadyrov, who's like a complete. I mean, if you exhibit Salafi thinking and tendencies there, like, you disappear, right? Right. So I get that. I mean, I know what you're saying, and yes, I mean, people who believe that ISIS is right, let's say, and they qualify. They might not say, they'll say, oh, but ISIS throws gay people off of buildings. They'll say, well, that's the laws of their lands. They'll be coy about it. Right. But I wouldn't necessarily put an ankle brace. I would not on somebody who talks like that. But somebody who's kind of been endorsing it, glorifying it, being very happy about it. Put him on a watch list. Put him on a watch list, yes. That's fine. But the guy ankle bracelet was for something a lot more extreme than that, because he was trying to get instructions. Okay, so that's different. That's there's a line. There's a line, right? For sure.
The point, what I wanted to actually say, and I wanted to move on to my next question to you,
and Patreon questions too.
And we're almost done. Yeah, I don't know how much time we'll have for that, but really let's just try. Okay. I know, but what I wanted to say was when Alishba actually went in and she was interviewed, and everybody else got involved, and the police and they checked out. We actually found out that Canadian, whether it's intelligence or the Canadian RCMP, they do a lot of hardcore shit behind the scenes compared to even the US or the UK, as you were saying. It seems like there's a front with the, everybody's nice and liberal, and but behind the scenes, foiled terrorist plots. I mean, Islamic terrorists over here have killed less people than the Quebec mosque shooting. Thanks
to people like you.
People like you, but also
not
thanks to the
lack of trying, right?
Yeah. But also thanks to the surveillance that you're talking about, that kind of happens very quietly and hush
surveillance
behind the scenes.
No, that's fine. Putting people on watch lists is not taking away their liberty.
No. Right, beyond watch lists, man. I mean, the way that they do things, I just got a small glimpse into it, and it seems. But I guess that the next question is, I wanted you to sort of compare the ISIS guys' mindset with the Toronto 18 case, like the sort of Al Qaeda inspired, right, and see if there are any differences and similarities, and maybe comment. No, and also comment on the patrons. Actually, there was a patron question on this. Is comment on the Umar Khadr situation, and
Yeah.
related to that. So just
Yeah. So very quickly, look, the guys that I saw in the Toronto case are, very similar to the guys that you're seeing in ISIS. Very, very similar.
driven
Young,
by
young guys, right? Usually young guys. I mean, involved in criminality, right? There's always a smattering of religious ideology. One is trying to be, like a scholarly type person, right? Like appealing to the Islamic sources, saying this verse of the Quran, this hadith, this episode in the life of the Prophet, alayhi salam. They will draw from all these things. It's exactly the same as you're seeing with ISIS. The only difference between Al Qaeda and ISIS is that to join Al Qaeda, you had to be vetted, and they don't take like young punks, right? Like they take people who are like adults who have a function, right? ISIS was open the door to everyone, right? Because they needed cannon fodder. They're not producing scholars, right? You're not gonna spend even 2 months learning Islamic law or whatever. I think you did it in like 40 days or 2 weeks, I think was their boot camp, Tawheed boot camp. Right? So
no more than average though.
Yeah, I mean, so the point is, so the profiles that you see in the Toronto 18 guys mirror images of the profiles you see in the ISIS cases.
Right. And the Qadr, sorry, and this is a paper
Omar
question.
Qadr.
Yeah.
I'll just talk about who Alex was asking in relation to this. What do you think of the Omar Qadr case? So just maybe a quick review of it for people who don't know.
Yeah, Omar Qadr, child, one of several children of jihadi-friendly family. The father, Saeed Qadr, had gone to Afghanistan. They were Al-Qaeda linked. And the Qadrs grew up there. Omar Qadr was taken there when he was very young, was basically put into service of the jihadis. So there was a couple of videos. He was making IEDs, whatnot. He was cornered in a home with another guy, allegedly threw a grenade while he was under rubble. I mean, they hit that place with a giant bomb. All right. The walls had fallen in on him, and allegedly he threw a grenade that killed one U.S. military member and blinded another. And so there was a big thing. He was sent to Guantanamo. There's an argument of torture. The Canadian government didn't do enough to repatriate him as a Canadian. The courts found that is true, and they have to pay him $10 million. And so $10 million became this payment amount. The argument was that if we kept fighting it in court, we knew we were going to lose, so it might as well just make the payout. This became a lightning rod, of course, for a lot of people who thought that, the liberal government is going easy on terrorists, and it became this
I'm
big
paying him
issue.
$10 million
By paying him $10 million. But look, I'm going to be very straight. We have a very famous general, Romeo Dallaire, who is an amazing individual. He was the UN force commander in Rwanda during the genocide.
Right.
Romeo Dallaire.
Oh, yeah, he was Canadian.
He's a Canadian as well. Romeo Dallaire, general, sees Omar Qadr as a child soldier. Sees him as a kid who was taken by his family, had no way of going anywhere. The Canadian consulate is like 200 kilometers away. He's the son of Ahmed Saeed Qadr. There's no taxi driver that's going to take him outside of that area. So there was no place he was going to go. The Guantanamo guards that were with him were sympathetic to him. So the people who guarded him don't believe that this guy did that. Right. And the physics just don't match up with the story, right? The building had been hit. After they found him, he was still under the rubble. So,
right. But people say 10 million was just too much. Some people say.
Well, I mean, look, Dennis Edney, who is his lawyer, was also defense lawyer for the main ringleader in the Toronto 18 case. Right. Fun fact: in the middle of prosecution, after he had finished cross-examining me, and where we're not allowed to talk about the case once that's over, he would talk to me about Omar Qadr in Guantanamo, that he would go and visit all the time. And so I would actually hear stories from Dennis Edney about Omar Khader, and he was just and Dennis Edney is an anti-establishment lawyer, an anti-government. He wants to not anti-government. He wants to keep governments responsible,
accountable, holding the government,
holding them accountable, and he did a great job in that. So when you think about it, $10 million at that level, they got the lawyers to negotiate that kind of money, and of course we don't like that. Money had to be paid by the government, but he's not the only one, right? There was also the story of Maher Arar. Who was sent wrongfully because of RCMP and CSIS negligence.
Extraordinary rendition.
And small world that it is, I was in Syria when Maher Arar was there. In fact, I was living in a small town. There was a police official there who was very friendly with me, right? Probably to keep tabs on me while I was there. But I was chill. I wasn't there for any bad reasons. He got promoted and went to Damascus. And one day came back trying to find me because he was worried because he heard stories about this Canadian guy who they were really messing up in the Damascus prisons. And it turned out to be Maher Arar when I came back.
I think more people should be angry with the Canadian government that they allowed this kid to go to Guantanamo and didn't defend them the way that they should have as a Canadian. I think that's actually that's the shameful part.
Well, that's mainly the reason for the payout, right?
Right.
That is the reason, right? It's. I mean, that we did something very wrong, and at least, I mean, the Liberal government now is trying to do this whole value of citizenship, right?
They're doing it a bit too much, though. They're over-adjusting.
Well, maybe. I mean, sure, one can make that argument, but like in this whole thing of stripping citizenship of ISIS fighters, right? Like, the argument goes both ways. Like we say that. You can still have your citizenship as a Canadian. It doesn't change the fact that you're imprisoned in a foreign prison, right? Like, and at least the ones that are in Kurdish custody, we have no legal obligations towards them.
Wasn't one of the Toronto 18 people? Wasn't one of the Toronto 18 people stripped of his citizenship as well?
No, there was an attempt to do that. Okay. Yeah, Zakaria Amara. He was the other ringleader, the bomb plot leader.
He issued the public apology, right?
Well, that's a bullshit apology that he read. Complete BS, because he ended up actually so they house all these guys together. So remember Momin Khawaja that triggered my interest in CSIS? Momin Khawaja was being housed at the same facility as these guys ended up being housed in. And Zakaria Amara threw boiling water all over Momin Khawaja in prison. Yeah, there was a whole fight they had.
Wait, why did they have access to boiling water? What the hell?
I know, they had some common area where they would make their food or whatever it was. Okay. Because they isolate and segregate these guys from everybody else, and now they get to chill with each other. And so they had this. So it just shows you that this is 2 years after his so-called apology letter.
All right, Aaron's question.
Yeah, we've got one more patron question left, and from Aaron Driver. No, Aaron Smith. It's a different one. Sorry. I just wanted to better understand the background of the pivotal conversation with the Sufi scholar. How did that happen? What made him open at that moment? And what made you open at the moment?
Yep. So understand that radicalization is not a neat and tidy process. It's just like radicalization. De-radicalization is just like it. There are points along your journey, given what you are already conditioned by. And as you go on that journey, different points, think about it like snakes and ladders, the board game, right? Some things send you forward, other things kind of walk you back a bit. So for me, I explained my radicalization journey, and in my de-radicalization journey, this was really kicked off. I would say the marriage really started that basic human intimacy needs. I would say, let's say, trumps the religious, right? That is something more human. And then it was the traumatic events of 9/11, seeing how we viewed it, how everyone else was receiving it, having this question moment in my mind that, man, I don't know Arabic, I don't know the Quran properly. So going to Syria, meeting this scholar, he was a teacher in one of my classes. What got me about why I think so I think I was already inclined that way and already on that path. Some people ask me, oh, if you would have run into an extremist scholar at this point, cross that out. That wouldn't have even happened. Like, I was not interested in that anymore.
No.
I had subconsciously and maybe overtly even started to move away from that. So the Sufi Sheikh, their whole thing is about what they call suhba, right? Like presence. And so the attitude that he had, so his demeanor was very positive. He was very kind. He was good looking. He smelled nice, right? I can kind of say
Like gulab, like gulab.
Right, all the senses. No, it was bakhur, like incense.
All you
they call-
evangelists, make sure you smell nice.
No,
and-
but he's saying even he like this is the key thing he's saying. Even if he did not find somebody that was giving him a different version of Islam, he had already made up his mind that he wanted something different. He had
Yes.
already made up his mind before somebody gave him a different interpretation, right?
Right. I knew what I didn't want anymore.
Right.
And so now I'm given this, and so this is where I'm introduced to Sufism. Where it's unfortunate most people don't know. It's unfortunate that this Wahhabi disease has infected the Muslim world. That the Sufis, they're unknown, right? Because the Wahhabis, of course, call the Sufis deviants and apostates and this and that. Meanwhile, the Sufis have been around from the beginning of the Islamic centuries, and it's a very, they talk about love. They
Right,
openly use words like love, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I would say that, especially coming from an Indian family background where you don't say "I love you" to your family members, I think even that was a reason for the message having such an impact. But going through the verses of the Quran in a manner of authority is really something that stuck with me. Reading the verses, now being able to access the same Quran that these lunatics are accessing, and learning why their interpretations were wrong. So it was a great experience.
You have two different needs, right? You have two different desires. One, a different path. Two, to keep your religion, right? You already found a different path. What you had with this Sufism was an excuse to keep your religion. But even if that excuse was not given to you, you were still on a different path away from radicalism. Given that your way out of radicalism was not because of this Sufi view of Islam.
Of course it was.
No,
I find you want to deny the role of religion
you
in
just
a
said
transformative way, right?
But I did not do that. I did not do that. You just did that, right?
No.
Yeah.
I told you I'm trying to give the full experience, right? And I will acknowledge for your purposes
Right.
non-religious elements.
Right.
But what actually was very important for me
Right.
was that religious part, because
Yes.
later what I did in the ISIS years, I was able to effectively confront these individuals, draw them out into arguments, go back and forth, verse to verse, and get to the end, right? And
Did you have
to
success with that?
well, so this was the argument, right? That how do you even measure that kind of success, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there were some people that were walked. I mean, there's one case, so you could Google ISIS and the Lonely Young American. ISIS and the Lonely Young American, also written by Rukmini Kalimaki from New York Times, and
Yeah.
I'm referenced in that article.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the few stories that became public where I had been intervening and preventing people from joining ISIS.
Right. Okay. One thing is mischaracter. I didn't say it wasn't important to you. I know it was important to you, but not. But what it seems to be different. It was important to you for you to be able to keep Islam. It wasn't important to you on your path away from your radicalism. Given that your path away from radicalism was something different, why are you prescribing the medicine that wasn't the reason why you walked away from radicalism?
I mean, he's saying it was.
No,
He's
but
saying
he
it was
just
a
said
big
that-
part.
Armin's
Ali-
trying to deny it, is what
But
he's
we're
doing.
going in circles, guys.
Ali, what are you talking about?
I'm really sorry. I want to be. No. Hold on. We're
Right.
going in circles.
He just said-
Mubin has. We have a time limit. I don't want to keep you over your time. So
Well, my
I'm
wife
just trying.
hasn't
Sorry, I'm
started
being the bad
waving
guy.
her hand yet at me, so
Yeah, I gotta say, the
was
thing
fun.
is, I think I think the discussion between Armin and you, where you guys disagree, I think it's very, very good for the audience.
Sure.
And I actually,
Right.
oh, sorry, and I really like it. I just I have to move things along.
But
So
by
I'm
the
gonna
way,
ask you
I just
the
have to
last
thank
question.
you before you ask the last question. Our disagreements are not as important as the fact that you save lives. Okay, like these are just disagreements that we have over the nature of Islam, what the Quran
right.
means, and we
Yeah.
could have these discussions, and we could fundamentally disagree with each other and have passionate
Yeah.
disagreements
And
with
we
each
all
other.
enjoy that.
We all
actually,
enjoy that, and it's so fun to do that,
Yeah.
right? But
That
at
is.
the end of the day, you are on the side of saving human lives, and you are not. You are beyond that. You are actually we are all here. On the side of peace, on the side of secularism, on the side of the rule of law, just rule of law, but you are actually somebody.
You made it happen,
You made it
right?
fucking
So-
happen, right? So whatever
There's a verse in the Quran, brother.
whatever
All you who believe, stand up for justice, even if it's against your family,
I
the
believe-
rich, the poor, even yourselves.
I believe in
I
your
love it.
justice more than the Quran justice. But at the end of the day, whatever disagreement we have over the
Sure,
Quran, you are a hero, and you are a hero to me. And I thank you for everything you've done
Right.
to
And
keep
I-
us
so-
safe.
Yeah, just in closing, I know that our audience is really going to want to know what you think about this controversy over Justin Trudeau talking about like repatriating ISIS fighters.
We're
I've
not
had-
doing that. The government policy is to not repatriate ISIS fighters. I know that it's election season and people are saying that, but that is absolutely not true.
That's okay. So I had a similar conversation with
They
somebody
are not
who's
coming
in the
back.
government. Yeah, and he said that we're only talking about the people who come back, and we don't know what they did. Like we were there, they're saying things, and there's no way to find out. And how can you prosecute them without any evidence? So he was talking about that, but
Sure, and I say, why would you go out of your way to repatriate them back to Canada anyway? Because the worst thing that could happen is that you bring them back only to let them go because you couldn't prosecute them. That would be the biggest miscarriage of justice, most immoral choice to make. I think public safety trumps everything right now with these people. We're hearing a lot of stories about the women especially. There have been attempts to kind of portray them in a sympathetic way. Oh, they were young, they were this. And then what ends up happening? Oh, guess what? They lied in their interview that they gave. Here's what they were really involved in, right? So we're finding stuff like this about them already while they're over there. I don't believe we should
why are they? So why is this all in the news? I mean, if they're not doing it, why is there?
They're
this
trying
whole
to
thing
get them
that-
out. They're trying to get them away out of the Kurdish hands. The Kurds don't want them. How can they continue to house and feed and basic human necessities? Like, who's going to do that for them? So there are motions underway at high level UN diplomatic levels where there is some funding being funneled to the Kurds to try to get this done. There's a new prison being built, of course, where I think they're going to try to make it a more secure prison because the fear is ISIS has replenished its ranks by freeing guys from prisons.
So you're saying
you don't want to put these guys back into service either, right?
So ISIS fighters, supposing they're ISIS fighters who went from Canada to fight for ISIS. So the Canada is kind of taking them back. They're saying this was our responsibility. We're going to take them back.
No, Canada's not taking them back.
Not taking them back.
Nobody's taking them back. Now, there are a few countries have, and there are some arrangements, but for example, Iraq is also taking other citizens. They're executing them. French, German. I think there's a Belgian who's on death row. I'm not sure if he was executed. Both male and female executions. Problem
without
with
due
Iraq-
process. Without due
Yeah,
process.
that's the problem.
But then, what are the headlines about?
Yeah.
There's all these headlines that we're repatriating ISIS fighters. Is that just
No, it is not true. It's completely not true. It's
So,
100%. So you can
the Trudeau government is not on board with that at all?
Trudeau government has rejected U.S. requests for countries to repatriate their citizens,
Whoa.
and basically said we're not listening to them. Okay,
So disparate from the headlines.
I'll tell you,
that
I
we're seeing.
myself will vociferously attack the Liberals if they were to attempt to repatriate ISIS fighters to Canada. I guarantee you that, and I have told them very clearly, don't do it because we don't want them.
But Mubin, the only question is, why are they saying it then? What's the reason for the public rhetoric?
I don't know what, maybe Conservative Party, you know, they're trying to, because I think it's along the lines of the Trudeau government is soft on terrorism.
Wait, are you
Right?
saying
That's
that
one of
people
their-
that are citizens of Canada and they want to come back, we have to remove their citizenship? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Oh.
no remove citizenship. We don't believe that.
Okay, good.
We just say we're not going to repatriate you. You can still be a Canadian in an Iraqi prison or in a Turkish prison.
You come back, you go to jail.
Oh.
Well, good. I mean, if you get,
Yeah.
sure, if you do the time in a Turkish prison and you're done, and they let you out, you can apply to come back.
Wait,
to Canada.
but can they come back if they want to?
So currently, Canadians who are in Kurdish custody cannot return back to Canada or in any custody.
So what does this repatriating
So
mean?
repatriating means that Canadian consular officials
Huh?
would go there,
Oh.
or at least the Canadians who are in custody. Let's theoretical. If they were to be dropped off to a Canadian consulate,
Right.
we would have to ready travel documents. For
Okay,
them.
but if they're going to be tortured in the prison, I want them back here.
So the Kurdish are not torturing anyone, and that's good. And that's
Okay.
one of the reasons why they've kept their citizens there under Kurdish custody.
Right.
Because the Kurds also are seeking recognition, international recognition, and it doesn't work if you're going to mass slaughter your detainees. So that's another reason why they remain with the Kurds. Now, here's the problem. The Canadians who, let's say, theoretically do come back, and you now have evidence that's been provided to you by the Kurds and maybe the Iraqis or others, and the those in custody say, sorry, I was tortured and everything is under duress. You have to reject everything. So now you just brought these guys back to Canada for due process, and basically now you're going to let them go because you can't prove that they did anything wrong. That's insane. That is insane to do and should not be done. It is far better that they remain in custody under the Kurds and have international organizations work on basic human necessities, obviously.
Right.
But beyond that, nothing else.
I'm just going to leave this one to the
Okay.
experts.
It's the ISIS zombie
I'm-
disease that they have, and they need to be quarantined.
Right.
Okay. I don't know. I'm gonna claim ignorance.
Okay, so I gotta,
Let's
I
wrap
know
it
you
up.
said 1.5 hours. We're being very greedy and keeping
Yeah.
you longer away from your family.
You're too interesting. That's why.
You are just, it's just, and I got so
Where,
much more. to ask
again,
about
where
this,
can
yeah.
people find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Mr. Mubin Shaikh, Mr. MR Mubin MUBIN Sheikh SHAIKH. That's me on Twitter, and my work email is work website is fusionintel.com. Fusionintel.com.
Right. And
go and hire him.
We're going to have that in the description here for those of you who are really interested in this. If you want just go to the iTunes description, the YouTube description where you're hearing this.
The public
check it
version,
out.
not the Patreon
Right,
version.
the public version.
Yeah.
It's going to be in the links below. So,
Yeah.
Mubin, man, I don't know how to thank you so much.
Yeah, most welcome.
Thank you.
It went much easier than I had these preconceptions, and I know there's a lot of drama and wars going on out there between you guys and some other people, but I take a very chill approach. You'll see this is the way that I am in person as well. So
you
I
had
think we should do
preconception-
this in person sometime. Sure.
Yeah,
you
we
had
should.
preconception about like ex-Muslims, right? Like, did you think like we're
Well-
gonna be what? Did
Well,
you think,
no, I've seen some. I've seen some of the more. I don't know. I think you were outside of MSA or ISNA. I think ISNA.
right?
I saw a video of that.
Yeah,
I
but
was like,
did you watch the conversations? They were very friendly.
I did. That's
uh.
what I liked about it. I was like, yeah, actually, like, yeah, okay, I agree with that. I was like, okay. So I thought, all right.
This is great. So see, when people when people say ex-Muslims are hateful and stuff, you go actually check what we do, and then you realize that we're not that bad.
Yeah, look, again, and never to judge like all members of any group the same way, right? Even I've seen with ex-Muslims and atheists, you have some who are, and I get it. Like, there's been a lot of shit that's happened to people in the name of Islam, and I totally get it, right? I can understand that. But there are people on all sides, right? I mean, and beyond all, like there's a great Rumi quote. He says, beyond what is halal and haram, lawful and unlawful, there is a field. I will meet you there.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. Yeah, I have got and
spoken like a true Sufi.
You know what? I'll tell you, like one thing that people, we have a lot of, we have a lot more common ground that we. Yeah, and I'm glad that there are more ex-Muslims who are speaking out about this rather than just those right-wing nuts that that Armin was referencing. Because again, we atheists, obviously, we have our share of assholes too. But the fact that ex-Muslims
called the regular distribution of asshole theory.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
I'm gonna use it.
But you know, guys like Abdullah Gondal, Abdullah Smear. I mean, there's these conversations that are happening where these people, we all come from Muslim families. We have Muslim relatives and friends that we care about and love that we grew up with. So we understand that side of things. And the vast majority of us are actually very liberal in that approach and very, very clear about making that distinction between criticizing ideology and demonizing people. So, yeah. So I think we have common ground there. But anyway, thank you so much, man. I mean, this was absolutely fascinating. I mean, it's just fantastic.
And thank you to our patrons in live chat. You guys make this show possible. So thank you for making this, for helping us do these shows.
Right.
Yes. And if you want to be a patron, link it in the description.
The secular jihadists have been made possible thanks to the Illuminati and the covert support of Israel and the CIA. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. If you like what we do, please support us. Share the podcast with your friends. Write and tweet us with topic and guest suggestions. Or head over to secularjihadist.com and give $1 or more for exclusive access to live video. Have your questions read and answered on the air and more. Till next time, may the flying spaghetti monster be with you.